she whispered. "I think I'd be happier beside someone more impressive than you." I smiled, wished her the best, and walked away without looking back. 10 months later, she ran into me at a private event where her new boyfriend was waiting in line hoping to shake my hand. "I think I'd be happier beside someone more impressive than you." She said it quietly, not in anger, not in a fight, just quietly, like she was reading a grocery list out loud. I didn't say anything back. I just stood there in our kitchen, one hand wrapped around a coffee mug that had gone cold an hour ago, and I let those words land wherever they were going to land. And here's the thing nobody tells you about a moment like that: it doesn't hit you all at once. It settles in slowly, the way cold water does when you step into it. First your feet, then your knees, then everything. She was looking at me the way people look at old furniture they're finally ready to replace. Not cruel, just decided. And I remember thinking, not in that moment, but later, much later, that the most painful part wasn't what she said. It was how unbothered she seemed saying it. I smiled. I told her I hoped she found exactly what she was looking for. And I walked out of that kitchen, out of that apartment, and I didn't look back once. Not once. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed absolutely everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. We were 28. She was Remington. We'd been together for 3 years and some months. Long enough that we had a coffee maker with each other's preferences programmed in. Long enough that her shampoo was on my shelf and my running shoes were by her door. 3 years of inside jokes and airport pickups and quiet Sunday mornings that felt like something worth keeping. Or so I thought. We lived in the kind of apartment that exists on the border between striving and arriving. Not broke, not comfortable, just perpetually in motion. I was building something. That was the honest answer to where I was in life at 28. Building. Just not fast enough for Remington. I should probably tell you what I was building, but I want you to understand something first. Because the story isn't really about what I had or didn't have. The story is about what she saw, and more importantly, what she refused to see. Remington worked in marketing at a mid-sized firm in Manhattan. She was sharp, genuinely sharp, the kind of woman who walked into a room and immediately understood the architecture of it, who was important, who was pretending, who could be useful. She was good at reading people, except, apparently, me. Or maybe she read me fine and just didn't like what the story said about her own future. That's the part one kept circling back to, in those first weeks after I left. I had been running a small creative consultancy for about 18 months at that point. Just me and 2 other people, a rented WeWork desk, and a client list that was still embarrassingly short. We did brand positioning, narrative strategy, identity work for companies that were trying to figure out what they actually were and how to say it to the world. Wilder had brought me my first real client, a tech startup in Brooklyn that needed a complete identity overhaul. Wilder was my oldest friend, the kind of person who had a gift for seeing what something could become before it looked like anything at all. He believed in what I was doing before I fully believed in it myself. But Remington had started making comments. Small ones, at first. "Don't you think you should be further along by now? Royce from my office just got promoted to VP. He's our age. Collins said her boyfriend is looking to invest in something with more stability." She never said them cruelly. That was the thing. She said them the way a doctor reads numbers off a chart. Clinical, observational, as if the emotional weight of the words wasn't her responsibility to carry. I noticed. I didn't say anything. I should have said something. There was a dinner, about 2 months before the kitchen conversation. Her work friends. A rooftop place in the West Village, the kind with ambient lighting and cocktails named after poets. I remember Remington laughing more than I'd heard her laugh in months. Not because something was funnier there, but because she was performing something. Some version of herself that fit that table. A guy named Lawson was there. Financial sector. Broad shoulders, loud watch. The kind of easy confidence that comes from never once having to wonder whether you belong somewhere. He wasn't rude to me. He was something worse. He was politely uninterested. He asked me what I did. I told him, and his eyes shifted the way elevator doors do when they're about to close. I watched Remington watch him. Just for a second. But I saw it. And I didn't say anything about it on the cab ride home. And she didn't either. And we both pretended the whole evening was fine. It wasn't fine. The weeks after that dinner had a different texture. Things that used to feel like comfort started feeling like negotiation. She started coming home later. She started talking about her coworkers in ways that subtly, consistently positioned me in contrast to them. Marcus just closed a deal worth 8 figures. Tara's husband bought them a place in Tribeca. Lawson got a piece written about him in some finance publication. Lawson. Again. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, staring at the pitch deck I was building for a new client. A genuinely interesting client. A sustainable fashion brand with a real story to tell. And I felt this small, quiet thing inside me that I didn't quite have a name for yet. It wasn't anger. It was more like recognition. Like finally seeing the shape of something that had been in the room with you for a long time. I didn't say anything. I went back to the pitch deck. I should have said something. She said it on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday. Not the kind with a storm outside or a fight that had been building for weeks. Just a regular Tuesday evening. I had been on 2 back-to-back calls, and I was tired in the specific way you get tired when you care about something, and it's taking longer than you hoped. She was standing at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, and I asked her if she wanted to order in. She put the phone down, and she said it. I think I'd be happier beside someone more impressive than you. I looked at her for a long moment. I want to be honest about what I felt, because the temptation in a story like this is to say I felt nothing, that I was above it, that I was already so emotionally prepared that her words just bounced off me clean. That's not true. It hurt. It hurt in a specific, precise way, the way things hurt when they confirm a fear you've been carrying quietly for too long. But underneath the hurt, there was something else. Relief. Because now I didn't have to wonder anymore. Now I knew exactly where I stood. And standing there, with her looking at me like I was a draft of something that hadn't made it to final, I made a decision. Not out of pride. Not out of anger. Just out of clarity. I smiled. I said, I genuinely hope you find that. And I walked out. The next 3 weeks were logistical. Moving my things. Canceling the joint subscriptions. Telling Wilder, who said approximately 4 words, good. You were shrinking. I didn't think much about Remington during that time. I was too busy. Not as a coping mechanism. I just had work to do, and now there was no ambient doubt in my apartment slowing down the current. The pitch deck I'd been building? It landed. The sustainable fashion brand, Monroe, they were called, run by a woman named Elsime who had built the entire thing from a single sewing machine in a studio apartment in Greenpoint. They signed. It was the biggest contract my consultancy had ever closed. The numbers were not Lawson in a finance publication numbers. But they were real, and they were mine, and they meant something. Wilder took me out to celebrate. We sat at a bar in the East Village, and he said, "You know what's about to happen now, right?" I asked him what he meant. He just smiled and drank his beer. I didn't know what he meant. I was about to find out. Here's the thing about building something in private. You don't get credit while you're doing it. You're invisible to the people who only measure worth by what's already arrived. But the work doesn't care whether it's being witnessed. The work just compounds. In the months after Remington, something shifted. Not overnight. Not in some cinematic montage sequence. Just, gradually, consistently, the work I'd been doing started finding its audience. The Monroe campaign got noticed. Not just noticed, it got the kind of attention that opens doors, the kind where other people start showing up at your door instead of you knocking on theirs. Zane, a creative director I'd admired for years, reached out. He wanted to talk about a potential collaboration. I said yes before he finished the sentence. 3 months later, we had a joint project with a client roster that made the old WeWork desk feel like a different life entirely. My consultancy moved into an actual office, then a bigger office. Then we started getting invited to things. Industry things. The kind of events with doors that don't list their addresses publicly. I want to stop here and tell you something, because I think it matters. I didn't do any of this for Remington. I want to be really clear about that. I didn't build the next phase of my career as a response to what she said to me in that kitchen. Her words weren't fuel. They weren't inspiration. They were just words, and I had already made my peace with them. What happened next happened because I had finally stopped leaking energy in the wrong direction. That's all. When you're with someone who makes you feel like a disappointment, you spend an enormous amount of psychological bandwidth managing that feeling, rationalizing it, minimizing it, trying to prove something to a person who has already decided their verdict. When that stops, when you're not managing that anymore, that energy has to go somewhere. It went into the work, and the work rewarded it. 10 months after the kitchen, Zane had been invited to speak on a panel at a private industry event, the kind held in a converted loft space in Tribeca, invitation only, maybe 80 people, the sort of room where the right introduction could change the trajectory of something. He brought me as part of his team. I wore a jacket I'd bought 2 weeks earlier. Not because I was trying to look impressive, just because I finally had something to celebrate, and I figured I'd dress accordingly. The room was good. Warm, full of people who were genuinely interested in each other, The kind of professional gathering that doesn't happen very often, where the networking feels less like hunting and more like conversation. I was standing near the bar, talking to a woman named Collins who ran a brand studio out of Chelsea, when I heard the door. I didn't look up immediately. I was mid-sentence. And then Wilder appeared at my elbow, very casually, very quietly, and said just 4 words. "Don't look right now." I looked. Of course I looked. Remington was standing near the entrance. She was with someone. A man. Broad shoulders, loud watch. Lawson. I recognized him immediately. That same easy, territorial confidence. The way he surveyed a room like he was calculating whether it was worth his time. They were together. That part wasn't a surprise, honestly. Something in me had already done the math on that. What happened next, though, that part one wasn't prepared for. Lawson noticed someone he apparently recognized across the room. He leaned toward one of the event organizers. I could see the gesture, the familiar tap on the arm, and he pointed. In my direction. The organizer nodded. And then Lawson started moving toward me, with a look on his face that I can only describe as hopeful. The look of someone who wants to make a good impression. I watched him approach. Watched Remington watch him approach. And I saw the exact moment she realized. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp, no stumble, no visible collapse. Just a very small, very quiet shift in her expression. The kind that happens when understanding arrives faster than you're prepared for it. She had walked into this room beside a man she had chosen because he represented something she thought I couldn't give her. Status, arrival, impressiveness, whatever that meant to her. And that man was now crossing the room with his hand already slightly extended, hoping to shake mine. Lawson introduced himself. I shook his hand. He told me he'd been following the Monroe campaign and that he had some clients in the sustainable space who he thought could benefit from the kind of narrative work we were doing. He was polished. He was genuinely interested. He was, in the world's worst timing, trying very hard to impress me. I talked to him for a few minutes, straightforward, professional, no performance in it. I gave him my card, and then I glanced past him, just once, just briefly, to where Remington was standing. She was looking at me, not with anger, not with regret, exactly, with something harder to name. Something like the specific discomfort of watching a story you thought you'd already finished write a new chapter without you. I looked away first, not to be cold, not to make a point. I just had nothing left to say to that particular expression on that particular face. Collins had rejoined our little cluster near the bar. Zane was gesturing me over toward the panel area. The room was full of people worth talking to, work worth doing, conversations worth having. I turned back to them, and that was it. Later, much later, Wilder and I were sharing a cab back uptown, and he was being insufferable about the whole thing in the specific way that only best friends are allowed to be. Do you understand what just happened in there? I have some idea, yes. Her boyfriend was in line. He wasn't in a line, it was more of a, he was waiting to shake your hand. I told him to keep his voice down. He did not keep his voice down. He said, I told you, man. I told you 10 months ago. You were shrinking. And I thought about that word. Shrinking. Because that's what it had felt like, honestly. Not a collapse, nothing that dramatic, just a slow contraction. The way you learn to take up less space around someone who makes you feel like too much of you is already too much. You start self-editing. You start pre-answering the disappointment before it arrives. You start building smaller because the person watching seems uninterested in anything that would require patience. I had been doing all of that, and I hadn't even fully realized it until it stopped. I want to tell you something about Remington, because I think the easy version of this story would make her a villain, and I don't think that's entirely fair. She wasn't cruel. She was impatient. She had a very specific picture in her head of what her life was supposed to look like at 28, and I wasn't matching it fast enough, and she made a choice based on that. Was it a bad choice? I think so. But not because of what happened to me after. That's not the measure of it. It was a bad choice because she was standing in front of something real and patient and worth waiting for, and she traded it for something that looked like a rival. Something that had the watch and the salary and the easy confidence. Something impressive by the definition she was using at the time. And maybe Lawson is wonderful. Maybe she found exactly what she was looking for. I genuinely don't know. What I know is that when she looked at me across that room in Tribeca, with her chosen man's hand still slightly warm from shaking mine, she didn't look like someone who had arrived. She looked like someone running a calculation she hadn't expected to have to run. I never reached out to her. She never reached out to me. That's the whole of it. No dramatic confrontation. No explanation owed or given. Just two people who used to share a coffee maker and a set of Sunday mornings, standing on opposite sides of a room that had quietly, finally, told its own story. There's something I think about sometimes, in the quiet hours, about the version of me that stays, that absorbs the comment in the kitchen and decides to fight for it. Not for love, by that point. Whatever we had wasn't love anymore. It was more like an argument about worth, but just out of stubbornness, out of pride, out of the fear that leaving means she was right. That version of me doesn't build what I built. That version of me keeps leaking energy into the wrong places. That version of me is still trying to prove something to someone who isn't interested in proof, only in results she can display. And the thing about building for someone else's validation is that the building never feels like it belongs to you. Even if it works. Even if you close the deal and get the write-up and get invited to the rooms. If you built it to change someone's mind about you, you'll always feel like a tenant in your own success. I built mine after she left. Or rather, after I left. Because that distinction matters. I was the one who walked out. I was the one who smiled, said I hoped she found what she was looking for, and moved toward the door without looking back. That small act of self-respect? That was the first brick. Everything else was just continuing to lay them. Wilder still brings it up, by the way. At least once a month, at minimum. He has refined the retelling of the event into something that now involves Lawson apparently getting down on one knee, which did not happen, and a spotlight, which also did not happen. I've stopped correcting him. It makes him happy. And honestly, every time he tells it, I find myself less interested in the part about Lawson and Remington, and more interested in the part that happened before any of that. The Tuesday evening. The cold coffee. The kitchen with the good light we'd argued about installing. Her voice, so quiet, so decided. And me, standing there, feeling the cold water rise. Choosing to walk toward the door instead of toward the argument. That's the part that mattered. Everything after that was just what happened when I finally had enough room to become what I'd been trying to become all along. She wanted someone more impressive. The word she used was impressive. Funny thing about impressive, it tends to belong to whoever the room has decided it belongs to, and rooms change their minds. I didn't become impressive for her. I didn't become impressive to prove a point. I just stopped apologizing for the pace of the build. I stopped letting someone else's impatience become my internal weather. I kept laying bricks. And one evening in Tribeca, in a room full of people I respected, a man with a loud watch reached out his hand and tried his best to make a good impression on me. I shook it. I wished him well. And I went back to the conversation that mattered. Some doors closed quietly. And they stay closed.